I was staring at a chipped mug of gas station coffee, lukewarm and sour, the kind you drink because it's cheaper than sleeping, when my phone buzzed like a dying insect. I was behind on 3 essays, had a shift at the diner in 2 hours, and honestly didn't think anything else could hit me harder than the exhaustion in my bones. But that text, those 3 words from my aunt, "call me now," felt like a warning wrapped in urgency, and my gut twisted in a way I couldn't ignore. I called her, and within seconds, the world I knew cracked apart like a windshield meeting a cinder block. "They're gone, Rachel. Your parents. They were in a car accident. Drunk driver." I'm so sorry, baby." There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but heavy, like the moment right before a thunderstorm breaks open the sky. That's what it felt like in my dorm room, quiet but suffocating. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat down on my bed and stared at the cracks in the ceiling like they could rearrange themselves into some sense of reason. My body went numb first, then the grief came later, like a slow bleed that wouldn't stop. And then she said it, those 5 words that forced me to breathe again, but only long enough to panic. "What about your sister, Lily?" Lily. My 6-year-old baby sister with tangled hair and a laugh that made every bad day better. My first thought wasn't how I'd tell her. It was something far worse. "Where is she now?" I asked, and even though I tried to keep my voice steady, it cracked like glass under a boot. "She's with Child Protective Services," my aunt said softly, like she was breaking bad news to a soldier already wounded. "They'll find her a foster home until they figure things out." No. Hell no. I threw everything into a duffel bag, books, chargers, clothes that didn't match, and took the next train home. I didn't care that I had finals next week. I didn't care that my bank account had $62.15 to its name. I only knew one thing. I had to get to Lily. When I walked into the CPS office, the receptionist looked up like she'd seen it all before. Maybe she'd seen 100 broke siblings trying to play parent after tragedy, only to crumble under paperwork, background checks, and minimum wage. I gave her my name, my sister's name, and waited in a plastic chair that made my legs stick to the seat like punishment. The social worker's name was Miss Chun. Mid-40s, tight bun, clipboard like a weapon. She didn't smile, didn't look up right away. "You're 19, unemployed except for part-time work at a diner, with no parental custody rights, no completed degree, and living in a shared dorm. Do you understand what that looks like on paper, Miss Ellis?" "I understand what it looks like in reality," I snapped, voice lower than I expected, harder. "She's my sister. She's all I have. I'm not letting her go through the system." She finally looked up. Maybe it was the fire in my eyes, maybe the desperation, but something in her face softened for half a breath. Then it returned, professional, impenetrable. "It's not about what you want, Rachel. It's about what's best for Lily." "I am what's best for Lily," I said, teeth clenched like I could bite through bureaucracy. "You think bouncing around foster homes is safer than staying with her sister who's willing to give up everything for her?" "Are you?" she asked. "What? Are you willing to give up everything for her?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence was the answer. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom, walls still painted a faded purple from when Lily was a toddler. My parents' photos were everywhere, wedding portraits, Disney trips, my graduation. All ghosts now. Lily was curled up in bed beside me, clutching a stuffed unicorn like it was her last link to normalcy. She had cried herself hoarse, asked 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. Why did Mommy and Daddy leave? Are they coming back? Am I going to a new family now? Every time, I held her tighter. "No, baby. You're staying with me. I promise. Even if it kills me," I wanted to say. But I didn't. The next morning, I made the call that would change everything. I dropped out of college. Full withdrawal. It was either that or wait for the system to label me unfit due to my schedule and lack of consistent housing. I picked up more shifts at the diner, morning, lunch, evening, if I could stomach it. I scrubbed toilets at night in an office complex 10 blocks away, dragging my body home at midnight, praying Lily didn't wake up crying again. She always did. Some nights, she crawled into bed beside me and whispered, "I want mommy." I never had the right words, so I just wrapped my arms around her and said, "I know, baby. I know." Child Services gave me 6 months. 6 months to prove I could provide stable, loving care with consistent income and housing. 6 months to convince them that a 19-year-old waitress could raise a grieving 6-year-old and not collapse under the weight of it. 6 months to become a mother with no training, no blueprint, no sleep. I started rationing meals. Ramen 3 nights a week, peanut butter sandwiches in between. Lily needed real food, so I made sure she had eggs, fruits, vegetables, whatever the discount bin offered. I could eat garbage. She couldn't. Our apartment was a 1-bedroom hole in a building that coughed and wheezed with every gust of wind. Lily took the bed. I slept on the couch. Or the floor. Sometimes in her bed, when the nightmares got too bad. We had a strict $40 a week grocery limit. I pawned the only jewelry my mother left me, her engagement ring. I cried in the pawn shop parking lot alone. But every day I braided Lily's hair, packed her lunch, kissed her forehead, and said, "You're so loved." Every night, I scrubbed grease off diner plates until my fingers bled. Then I mopped office floors while listening to parenting podcasts, wondering if love was enough to keep a child whole. Our first real came 5 months in. Lily's school was putting on a play. Some second-grade adaptation of The Lion King. She was a zebra, not a main part, not even a line, but she practiced for days like it was Broadway. I barely made it in time. My boss wouldn't let me leave the shift, so I cleaned bathrooms in record time and sprinted 10 blocks with wet shoes and sweat down my spine. I slipped into the back of the gymnasium just as the curtain rose. Dozens of tiny kids in cardboard masks, taped together tails, and glittery makeup. And then I saw her. Lily was standing center left, holding her spot like it mattered more than gravity. She scanned the crowd with wide eyes. For a moment, her shoulders sagged, like maybe I wasn't there. And then, she saw me. She smiled. No, she beamed. Like she had waited her whole life to find my face in that crowd. Like I was the sun in her sky. And right then, it was all worth it. Every hour I worked. Every night I cried. Every "you can't do this" I heard from strangers in suits. Because my baby sister saw me. And in that moment, I wasn't 19. I wasn't a dropout. I wasn't poor or broken or scared. I was her mother. People talk about time like it's a healer, some generous magician that comes sweeping in with bandages and grace when life cracks you open. But time isn't a healer, it's a ledger. It keeps track of every choice you make, every hour you trade, every night you choke back your own scream because someone else needs sleep more than you need relief. Time didn't heal me. It just hardened the parts of me that used to dream. 10 years passed like sand through a clenched fist, slow enough to feel every granule, fast enough to leave nothing behind but grit. I was 29 now. Receptionist by day, freelance tutor by night, and somewhere in between, a full-time guardian to a girl who had once clung to my hand like I was the only island left in her storm. Now she barely looked up from her phone long enough to acknowledge my existence. Lily had grown into a force, sharp-witted, straight-A genius, the kind of teenager that makes guidance counselors whisper the word Ivy League like it's sacred. Teachers loved her. Friends adored her. Boys chased her with awkward confidence. She was everything I had once hoped to be before the ground cracked beneath my feet. But with that brilliance came a distance. Not malicious, not even intentional. Just the slow unraveling of a bond that had once been forged in blood and grief. She didn't see me anymore, not really. It started subtly, like rot beneath polished wood. Missed thank yous. Eye rolls at reminders. Silence in place of conversation. I chalked it up to adolescence. All teens get moody. All teens push back. But then the edges started to cut deeper. One night, around 9:30, I heard her trying to sneak out. She thought she was quiet, she wasn't. I met her at the door, arms crossed, exhaustion lining my face like a roadmap of the years I had carried her through. "Where do you think you're going?" I asked, not even raising my voice. I didn't have the energy to be angry. She rolled her eyes, the kind of theatrical dismissal that made my spine straighten and my heart sink. "Just a party," she said. "It's not a big deal. It is when it's on a school night and you haven't finished your trig homework." "Oh my God," she snapped, tossing her purse down like it betrayed her. "You're not my mom, Rachel. Stop acting like it." It landed like a slap across my face. I didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't breathe. I just nodded once, sharp, shallow, like if I moved too much, everything inside me would splinter. I turned around without another word and went back to the kitchen. The dishes had piled up, as they always did. Pizza crusts hardened on plates, syrup clung to forks, and glasses bore the fingerprints of a life that demanded more than it ever gave. I scrubbed. Hot water. Soap. Scouring pad. I scrubbed like the porcelain had offended me, like the plates carried the weight of words I didn't know how to swallow. Each scrape of the sponge felt like punishment for believing that love alone could make a child understand the cost of survival. When I was done, I sat down on the cold tile floor, wet hands trembling in my lap, and cried so quietly I could hear the clock ticking above the fridge. I never asked to be her mother, but I never stopped trying to be one either. People said I was strong. They said it with admiration laced in pity, as if I were some charity case with decent posture. "You've done so much for her," they'd murmur at PTA meetings or award ceremonies. "You're practically her mom." Practically. As if the years I gave up didn't quite add up to motherhood. As if the 3 a.m. fevers, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the missed promotions, the $700 braces, and the 10,000 sandwiches I packed didn't quite count because I never pushed her out of my body. But let me tell you something, love isn't measured in labor pain. It's measured in what you give up that no one else sees. I gave up college. I gave up sleep. I gave up the man who loved me for 8 years. His name was Ethan. He was quiet, steady, kind in a way that wasn't performative. He met me when I was 22 and thought I had nothing left to offer but scars and bills. But he saw through that into the parts of me that still remembered how to laugh, how to dance barefoot in the living room on Fridays. He loved Lily too. Picked her up from practice. Helped with science fair volcanoes. Took her to movies when I worked double shifts. For a while, I let myself believe we were building something together. A life. A home. Then one night, over takeout and bad TV, he pulled out a small velvet box. I knew what it meant before he even opened it. "Marry me," he said. "Let me make this life easier. Let me carry some of it." And for a moment, just a second, I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes. But then I saw Lily's face. Not the one in front of me, but the one I knew would show up eventually. The resentment. The confusion. The displacement. She'd never said it, but I knew the part of her that clung to control wouldn't survive sharing me. And so I looked Ethan in the eyes, kissed his hand, and whispered, "I can't." He waited for me to explain. I didn't. He left a week later. He never called again. I didn't blame him. Lily never asked why Ethan disappeared. She never asked why I came home with puffy eyes and silence on my tongue. She just assumed, as most teenagers do, that adults are made of stone and nothing hurts them. I continued working. I continued parenting. She continued growing. The night before her graduation, I stayed up late sewing a hem on the dress she insisted on buying 2 sizes too big because it was on sale. She hadn't said thank you when I paid for it. She hadn't offered to help. She just dropped it on the kitchen counter and said, "Can you fix this?" And of course I did. Of course, I stayed up till 1 a.m. with a needle between my fingers and a knot in my back. I ironed it too. Pressed it to perfection. That's what you do when you love someone. You labor in silence. Her graduation was beautiful. Sunlight. Balloons. Speeches from people who would forget her name by August. I watched her walk across that stage with the kind of pride that doesn't fit inside your chest. My baby. My girl. My miracle. Then she stepped up to the mic for her valedictorian speech. She looked radiant, confident, poised, the embodiment of every prayer I whispered into cracked ceilings when we had nothing but hope and hand-me-downs. And then she said it. I want to thank those who inspired me. My teachers. My friends. And of course, my mentors, those who believed in me. She didn't say my name. She didn't look at me. She didn't even glance in my direction. I clapped anyway, because that's what love does. It shows up even when it's not invited. Later that night, as she posed for photos with friends and opened congratulatory cards from people who didn't know her middle name, I sat at the edge of our porch and sipped the lukewarm coffee I had reheated 3 times. I stared at the sky, searching for something bigger than the hollow ache in my ribs. My phone buzzed. A text from her. 1 sentence. Thanks for ironing the dress. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled. Not because it made the pain disappear, but because it meant she still saw me, even if only for a flicker. Let them call me, practically, her mother. Let them measure my worth in technicalities and titles. I know what I gave. I know what I built from the rubble. I know who she became because I never gave up, even when the world did. People think betrayal always comes with screaming, with plates shattering against the wall or dramatic exits in the rain. But the worst kind of betrayal doesn't come loud. It doesn't announce itself like thunder. It comes quietly, with a smile, a soft voice, and a carefully chosen silence that erases you 1 sentence at a time. It wasn't one moment. It wasn't a slap across the face or a line crossed in a fit of rage. It was 1,000 small choices made by the person I loved more than my own breath. My baby sister. My miracle. The girl I gave up everything for. And she didn't need to hate me to hurt me. All she needed was to forget. Lily was 25 now, and the world had cracked open for her like it had been waiting all along. She had a master's degree, a tech startup job with stock options, and the kind of polished confidence you can only afford when you've never had to wonder if the lights would stay on. She fell in love with a man named Daniel, the kind of man you don't meet unless you're already orbiting rarefied air. His family had money that didn't talk, it whispered. Old money. Country club money. Legacy Ivy League, private jet, monogram stationery kind of money. They wore wealth like cologne, subtle, expensive, impossible to ignore. I met them at a family brunch one fall morning. I wore a black blazer I'd bought secondhand and pressed 3 times to make sure it didn't wrinkle at the seams. They wore cashmere like it was cotton and spoke with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. This is my sister, Rachel, Lily said, gesturing to me quickly like I was a piece of furniture she couldn't quite explain but didn't want to hide. She didn't say guardian. She didn't say she raised me after our parents died. She didn't say she gave up her entire future so I could have mine. Just sister, 1 word, flat and clean, like the decades between us had never happened. I shook hands with Daniel's mother, a brittle woman with perfect teeth and eyes that darted like she was scanning for imperfections. Ah, she said, voice dipped in something syrupy and sharp, the older sister. Of course. That, of course, told me everything. She already knew about me. They all did. I stayed quiet during brunch, sipping orange juice while they discussed ski trips and hedge funds, art auctions, and political gala invites. When they asked what I did for a living, Lily jumped in too quickly. Rachel just helps people with tutoring sometimes, she said, laughing like it was cute. She's kind of the family philosopher. She didn't say I'd worked 2 jobs for 15 years. She didn't say I taught entire classrooms of underfunded students during the day, then turned around and tutored rich kids at night. She didn't say I was the reason she graduated debt-free, the reason she never had to work a shift that broke her back or her pride. I smiled politely and nodded, because some wounds don't bleed out loud. The real cut came 2 weeks before the wedding. Lily and I were having coffee at my place, just the 2 of us, the way we used to on Saturdays when I'd slice apples into stars and tell her stories about the constellations. We were looking over guest seating, her laptop open, papers scattered, and a kind of busy energy around her that I hadn't felt in years. "I was thinking," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "for the rehearsal dinner, maybe keep things simple." I didn't understand at first. Simple how? She hesitated, just for a second. "Maybe just stick to the essentials, you know? Just close friends, immediate family." Daniel's family is very traditional. I raised my eyebrows. "I am immediate family." She exhaled like I was making this difficult. "You know what I mean. It's just, I don't want to bring up the past. It's not the time for drama." That word, drama, hit me like a cold slap. "Drama?" I repeated, carefully. "You think my presence is drama?" "No," she said quickly. I want everything to be perfect. And bringing up the whole raised me thing, it's a lot. Especially around Daniel's family. They don't really get that kind of story. That kind of story. You mean the one where I spent my youth making sure you had a future? The one where I skipped meals so you could have ballet shoes? The one where I stayed awake for 3 straight nights when you had a fever so high I thought you'd die? That story? "I see," I said, voice like stone. "You want to rewrite the narrative." "It's not like that," she whispered. But it was exactly like that. A few days later, I arrived early at the rehearsal dinner, dressed in a navy blue dress that I'd saved up for over 3 months to afford. I'd even gotten my nails done, something I hadn't done in years, because I wanted to look presentable. I wanted to be proud of myself, just once. They seated me near the back, near the exit, behind a column, in a chair that wobbled. In front of me were lawyers, investors, people who spoke in portfolios and laughed at wine pairings. Across the room, Lily stood beneath a chandelier, glowing and graceful, laughing as Daniel's mother adjusted the pearls around her neck. I wasn't introduced to anyone. No one asked who I was. And when someone finally turned to me and asked if I was from the groom's side or the bride's, I opened my mouth. But before I could answer, Daniel's mother walked past me and said to someone behind her, just loud enough, just carelessly enough, "At least she won't bring that waitress sister to the rehearsal dinner." I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just reached for my water and sipped it slowly, staring at the centerpiece like it could swallow me whole. That night, I sat in the parking lot with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I stared out at the glowing restaurant windows and thought about how many times I'd waited in cold cars while Lily was in dance class, how many times I'd skipped lunch so she could have dinner, how many times I'd told her she could do anything, be anyone. And now she was someone. Someone important. Someone admired. Someone who no longer knew how to say thank you. I didn't go inside my house right away. I just sat there, eyes dry, heart raw, wondering if I should even attend the wedding. What was the point? To sit in the back again? To watch her thank everyone but me? To pretend I was proud while she erased me from her origin story? I didn't make the decision until the morning of the wedding. The dress hung in my closet, simple, elegant, a soft maroon that Lily once said looked too old-fashioned, but I loved anyway. I looked at it for a long time. I thought about the vows I'd never spoken. The life I never built. The name I never changed. I thought about every sacrifice that had led to this day, and how none of it mattered to her anymore. But in the end, I went. Not because she deserved it, but because love doesn't expire just because it isn't reciprocated. Love endures, even when it's invisible. The ceremony was beautiful. The kind of perfect, overpriced fairy tale you see on magazine covers. Flowers everywhere. Violin quartet. Vows that sounded like poetry rehearsed under candlelight. I watched from the 3rd row. Not the front. Not next to her. Behind the photographers, beside a great-aunt who couldn't remember anyone's name. Lily walked past me without looking. She held Daniel's arm like he was her entire future. And I let her go again. Just like I did when she cried for our mother. Just like I did when she got into college. Just like I did when she asked me to step out of the spotlight so she could shine alone. During the reception, I stayed for one dance. One speech. One toast. She thanked Daniel. She thanked his parents. She thanked her professors, her friends, her mentors. She didn't mention me. Not once. But I already knew she wouldn't. Because this wasn't our story anymore. This was hers. And in her story, I was the shadow she didn't want the light to catch. I left early. No dramatic exit. No confrontation. No tears. Just the quiet click of heels against marble and the soft creak of a door closing behind me. And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I realized something I had refused to face for years. I raised her. But she didn't become who she was because of me. She became who she was in spite of me. Because in her world, pain was something to be hidden, not honored. And I had always worn my scars like armor. I don't hate her. I want to make that clear. I'm not bitter. I'm tired. There's a difference. I still love her. But I've stopped expecting her to love me the way I need. And maybe that's the final sacrifice. Not the years. Not the work. Not the loneliness. But the surrender. The letting go. The quiet acceptance that sometimes the people you saved won't remember your name when they climb the stage. There's a silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the crushing pressure of being tolerated in a room where you used to be loved. It creeps up your spine, settles on your shoulders, and squeezes every word out of your throat until all that's left is the scream you're too dignified to release. I walked into the wedding that day like I was walking into an old war I had already lost. My dress was modest, maroon satin, ankle length, a soft neckline that didn't ask for attention. I wore no jewelry, but a single ring my mother had left behind, and a small clutch that held nothing but tissues and quiet resolve. The ceremony was over. The vows had been spoken. The dance had been danced. I had missed the part where Lily promised forever to a man whose family saw me as a punchline. Maybe that was for the best. I wasn't there to interrupt her joy. I wasn't there to make a scene. I just wanted to say goodbye to the version of her that still remembered me. The reception was a sea of glassware, laughter, and orchestral covers of pop songs no one danced to. Tables were draped in ivory linen. Wine bottles gleamed under chandelier light. Everything was pristine, curated, controlled. Everything but me. I sat near the back again, of course. Not the furthest, not next to the kitchen doors, but far enough to send a message. I didn't mind. I had stopped expecting honor a long time ago. I was there because I needed to see her face one more time. I needed to look at the woman she'd become and release the ghost of the girl I had raised. For the first hour, I sipped water, listened to idle chatter, watched waiters move like dancers between tables of people who thought legacy was something you inherited, not something you bled for. Then the toasts began. It started with Daniel's best man, safe, funny, just enough edge to get a laugh. Then his mother spoke, her voice trembling with practiced sentiment, thanking God and fate and our beloved guests from so many generations of excellence. Lily's boss said a few words too. Even the maid of honor kept things short and sweet. And then, of course, the father of the groom stood. He didn't take the mic right away. He walked to the front with the grace of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. His tux was perfect. His hair still thick and silvered like it had been professionally aged. The room quieted, eager, reverent. I must say, he began, swirling his wine glass like it was part of the show. Tonight is an extraordinary celebration. Not just because two remarkable young people have found each other, but because we've all come together, regardless of background or history. He paused. People smiled. We come from different worlds, he said, chuckling as if that was endearing. And yet, somehow, those worlds have collided beautifully. My son, the son of a surgeon and a judge, has found his match in a woman whose story is, well, unconventional. There was a flicker of discomfort across a few faces. I felt my spine straighten. He went on. We all know Lily is brilliant, bright, articulate, driven. A scholarship kid made good. The kind of Cinderella story that looks great on college brochures. And from what I hear, she had some help along the way. Isn't that right? He looked around. Laughed. Her sister, I believe, raised her. A waitress, if I'm not mistaken? Or was it a tutor? Or both? Another chuckle. I have to admire the grit it takes to stick to a life like that. To sacrifice so much and yet never quite move on. The laughter that followed was polite, controlled. A few clinked glasses. Some avoided my eyes. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought I'd break a molar. Lily sat beside him, eyes wide. She didn't move. She didn't reach for the mic. She didn't correct him. She didn't say, "That's not funny." She didn't say anything. I stood up. Not fast. Not loud. Just deliberately. I picked up my glass, not wine, just water, and walked slowly toward the front. The clinking stopped. The whispers started. I didn't take the mic. I didn't need it. I looked straight at the man who had just used me as a casual insult at his son's wedding and asked, voice calm but sharp enough to split bone, "Do you even know who I am?" The room froze. He blinked. "I beg your." "Do you know what it means?" I said, raising my voice just enough to be the person who gives up her entire life so someone else can have theirs. No one moved. No one breathed. "I'm not here to shame anyone," I said, turning slowly toward the crowd. "I'm not here to embarrass a bride or ruin a wedding. But since we're passing around jokes and cheap applause, let me set the record straight." I stepped forward, each word heavier than the last. "My name is Rachel Ellis. I was 19 when our parents died. I was a freshman in college. I had $58 to my name and a little sister who had just lost everything. The state wanted to put her in foster care. They said I was too young, too broke, too unstable. But I refused. People stared. I dropped out of school. I took 2 jobs. I worked at a diner in the morning and cleaned offices at night. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I didn't sleep. I taught myself how to be a mother because no one else would. I braided her hair before school. I walked her to therapy appointments. I sat by her bed every night for 5 years because she couldn't sleep without hearing our mother's voice. I turned back to the groom's father. I scrubbed floors so she could go to college. I stayed behind so she could move ahead. I didn't get a diploma. I didn't get applause. I didn't get mentioned in any of her speeches. And I sure as hell didn't expect to be mocked at her wedding. He paled. Completely. Lily was crying now, silent, her hand covering her mouth. I wasn't done. And you know what? I don't regret it. Not a second of it. Because love isn't about being thanked. It's not about being seen. It's about showing up. Even when no one notices. Even when you're treated like a footnote in your own story. I lowered my voice. But just for tonight, I needed to be heard. And then I walked out. Before the applause. Before the apologies. Before she could say she was sorry. Because some things don't need closure. Some things just need truth. I stood outside under the sharp night sky, the cold cutting through the fabric of my dress like punishment and release. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from the weight I'd carried for so long finally shifting off my back. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps. It was Lily. She didn't speak at first. She just stood in front of me, eyes red, makeup smudged, the wind catching her veil like a flag in retreat. "I didn't stop him," she whispered. "No," I said. "You didn't." I should have said something. Yes. I was scared. "So was I replied. "For 10 years. She looked down, then back up. "Why didn't you ever tell them?" "Because I didn't raise you for credit," I said. "I raised you to survive. I didn't think I had to defend my place in your story." She cried. I didn't. I had cried enough. We stood there in silence, the kind that follows a storm, raw, broken, and oddly clean. Finally, she reached for my hand. I let her take it, but I didn't hold it back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because love can forgive a lot. But dignity, once buried, takes time to exhume. Some people think stories end when the music stops, when the credits roll, or when the crowd goes home and the lights dim. But the truth is, life doesn't wrap itself neatly in bows or fade-outs. It just continues. It breathes, it lingers, it echoes long after the climax, like a storm that's passed, but left the air thick with memory. After the wedding, after the toast, after the confrontation that cracked years of silence wide open like a fault line, I didn't expect anything. No calls. No apologies. No gestures of regret wrapped in expensive wine or white envelopes. I expected the silence to harden between us like concrete, something we could build separate lives on. And I was okay with that. I had made peace with being the chapter no one read aloud anymore. But grief, like love, always finds a way back to its origin. 3 months passed without a word. Then, one morning, a letter arrived in a plain envelope with no return address, no elegant seal, no pretense. Just my name written in Lily's handwriting, the same script I had watched her practice as a child when she was trying to master cursive and cried because the letter R looked like a swan with a broken neck. I sat at my kitchen table, still in my robe, coffee gone cold beside me, and stared at it like it might vanish if I blinked. Then I opened it. Dear Rachel, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from right now. And maybe I deserve that. Maybe I deserve silence. But if there's still room in your heart to read this, I need you to hear me not just as your sister, but as the woman you raised. That night, at the wedding, I failed you. I stood there and let someone mock you like you were disposable, like the years you bled for me didn't matter. And I didn't speak. I didn't defend you. I didn't stop him. I told myself I was trying to keep the peace. But the truth is, I was afraid. Not of him. Not of judgment. I was afraid of the reflection of myself in your eyes. I was afraid you'd see that I had become someone who forgot where she came from. You didn't ruin my wedding. You saved my soul. And I should have said it that night. I've been thinking about you every day since. About the sandwiches you made me when you couldn't afford lunch for yourself. About the way you curled up beside me every time I woke up screaming after the accident. About how you held me like I was your lifeline when you were the one drowning. You never once made me feel like a burden. And I carried your sacrifices like they were invisible. Because I didn't want to look weak. Because I thought strength meant never needing anyone. But now I know real strength is what you did. Real strength is giving up your future so someone else can find theirs. And now, I have a daughter. She was born last week. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Healthy. Beautiful. Mine. Her name is Rachel. I named her after the strongest woman I've ever known. Because I want her to grow up knowing what strength looks like. I want her to know who she comes from, not money, not titles, not grand speeches, but from grit and grace and a woman who raised a broken girl into someone brave enough to say, I was wrong. I love you. I'm sorry. Please come see her. Love. Lily. I sat there for a long time after finishing the letter. Long enough for the sun to crawl across the window pane and cast sharp lines across the hardwood floor. Long enough for the tears to fall freely, silently, without shame. They didn't come in sobs. They didn't need to. They came like rain on a roof after months of drought, gentle, steady, inevitable. And as the words soaked into my skin like balm over old wounds, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. I had never needed her to repay me. I had never even needed her to apologize. I just needed her to see me. 3 days later, I stood on the porch of her house, clean, modern, warm, the kind of place you build when you believe in foundations again. My palms were damp, my chest tight. My knees trembled slightly, and for a second, I considered turning around and walking back to my car. But then the door opened. She stood there, baby in her arms, eyes wide and wet, no makeup, no armor. Hi, she said, voice cracking. I didn't speak. I stepped forward. And for the first time in years, I pulled her into a hug without holding back. She cried into my shoulder like the child she once was. And I let her. Because even though she had hurt me, even though she had forgotten me, even though she had rewritten me out of her proudest chapters, she had come back. And that mattered. She led me inside, Her home smelling like lavender and milk, like something new and tender, and just beginning. "This is her," she said, gently shifting the blanket to reveal a tiny face, soft skin, sleepy eyes, a little tuft of dark hair curling at the top of her head. "She's perfect," I whispered. "She's yours too," Lily said. I looked up, surprised. "I mean it," she continued. "I don't want her to grow up thinking love is silent, or that sacrifice goes unnoticed. I want her to grow up knowing that love sometimes means being invisible. But not anymore." I held the baby then. Her skin was warm, her breathing soft. Her fingers curled instinctively around mine, like she knew me already. I stared down at the baby girl who bore my name. And for the first time in a long, long time, I let myself hope. The months that followed were quiet but full. We rebuilt slowly. No grand gestures. No forced forgiveness. Just presence. Sometimes Lily would call just to talk. Sometimes I'd stop by with soup or books or a few minutes to hold the baby while she slept. She never called me, just her sister again. Sometimes she called me the woman who raised me. Sometimes she called me the reason I survived. She always called me Rachel. On Rachel's first birthday, Lily stood up during a small backyard gathering, nothing fancy, just close friends and mismatched chairs, and held a toast. "I used to think love was something you earned by being perfect," she said, holding her daughter in her arms. "But my sister taught me that love is what you give even when no one is watching. She taught me that the strongest women aren't always the ones at the front of the room. Sometimes they're in the back, quietly holding the whole damn thing together." She looked at me, and now I see her. I didn't cry this time. I smiled. Because love may start in silence. But when it's real, it always finds its voice.